On Christmas Eve, my parents threw me out of our $1 million suburban home, while my little sister filmed it for TikTok. But what happened 57 minutes later, when a barefoot old woman appeared out of the fog, changed my entire life forever. Hi, I'm Aubrey Lane, and this is the Christmas Eve that rewired my entire life. It was 10:42 p.m. when my parents opened the front door of our Boston suburb mansion and tossed my single suitcase onto the snow. My little sister, Bree, stood behind them smirking like she'd just won a prize. "Let's see how you survive now," she said, recording me for her followers. I walked down the driveway with nothing but a thin coat and a heart that felt already frozen. Snow whipped against my face, and for the first time in my life I realized something terrifying. I had no home. Not anymore. I found a bench outside a small park 2 streets over, one of those perfectly decorated New England neighborhoods that look like postcard pictures. Christmas lights everywhere, families laughing, warm windows glowing gold. Every house but mine. I was shaking, teeth clattering like glass, when I heard it. Soft, dragging footsteps on the pavement. An old woman appeared through the fog, barefoot, arms wrapped around herself, skin purple from the cold. "Miss, do you know if the shelters downtown still take people tonight?" she whispered. My throat closed. She had less than I did, and somehow she was still polite, still gentle. Something inside me cracked. Without thinking, I took off my only warm coat, the one thing keeping me alive, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She gasped as the warmth hit her. Then she held my freezing hands and whispered, "Kindness like yours is rarer than diamonds." She walked away into the fog. I never saw her again. Or so I thought. Exactly 1 hour later, the quiet street filled with the hum of engines. I looked up to see a line of black SUVs, all identical, all expensive, rolling to a stop in front of me. The middle car door opened. The same old woman stepped out, except she wasn't old anymore. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her coat was camel cashmere. Her jewelry sparkled under the street lamps. Her security team surrounded her like she was royalty. She walked right up to me, the shivering girl sitting on a park bench with numb hands, and she smiled softly. "You gave away the last thing keeping you warm," she said. "I've been watching you long enough to know exactly who you really are." Then she held out her hand and said a sentence that rewrote my entire future. "Come with me. You don't deserve to freeze alone tonight." What happened after that? Trust me. If you've ever been thrown away by the people meant to love you most, drop in there or your city in the comments so I know I'm not alone. And keep watching, because the next 24 hours turned into a Christmas miracle no one would ever believe. The tires whispered over the gravel as the motorcade curved around the last bend, and for a moment I thought we had taken a wrong turn. Nothing about this hidden pocket of Atherton looked real. The houses in Hillsborough were mansions. This place felt like a private kingdom carved out of time itself. The gate-ornate black iron wrapped in vines of blooming white roses swung open without anyone touching it. The BMW rolled forward, slow and deliberate, like it was following a script written long before I stepped into this story. I pressed my hands against my jeans to keep them from shaking. I'd spent the last 48 hours in a motel room that smelled like moldy air freshener. Now, I was entering a street lined with 100-year-old oaks and homes that looked like they belonged in English aristocracy documentaries. The car stopped in front of a Tudor mansion so tall and sweeping it made my childhood home look like a guest house. 3 steep gables, leaded glass windows glowing gold, ivy crawling across the stone facade. A house that didn't show off. It whispered power, the old kind, the kind people inherit or marry into. Not the kind you pull off with good lighting and an Instagram filter. The door opened before I even reached for the handle. A butler in a charcoal suit nodded, his face unreadable, like he saw strangers walk into miracles every day. Inside, the air smelled like cedarwood, roses, and something warm, maybe cinnamon from a fire burning somewhere deeper inside the house. The marble floors were veined with gold, polished so perfectly I could see my reflection in them, tired eyes and all. She walked ahead of me without speaking, her heels silent on the marble. Even her footsteps were elegant. I followed her through an arched hallway lined with oil paintings that probably lived in museums before they ended up here. Every few steps, I caught my breath again at the high ceilings painted with scenes of constellations, at the grand staircase twisting like something from a fairy tale, at the way everything seemed to glow without visible light. Then we stepped into a room that made me stop completely. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a private lake smooth as glass, reflecting the early morning sky in soft pinks and blues. A fire crackled in a stone hearth tall enough for a person to stand inside. Antique books filled the shelves from floor to ceiling. leather spines worn from hands that had probably changed the world. I backed up a step, overwhelmed. Just 48 hours earlier, I was crying on a frozen bench with nothing but a suitcase and a coat I no longer had. And now this. This room. This house. This woman who saw me really saw me when my own family never had. She motioned for me to sit on a cream sofa. So soft, I sank into it like it remembered every person who'd ever sat there. I couldn't stop staring at her, not because of how wealthy she clearly was, but because she looked completely at home inside all this, like she wasn't impressed by any of it, like she'd built it, then outgrown it. A butler poured tea. Neither of us touched it. She studied me for a moment that seemed to last forever, her expression softening just a little, the way someone looks at a puzzle piece they've finally found after searching for years. Then she said quietly, "Before we begin, you need to understand something. Nothing about what is happening right now is an accident." And in that moment, in that impossible mansion on that impossible morning, I believed her. By the time we stepped inside, the cold air from the mansion's central AC brushed across my face like a reminder. This was no dream. The marble floor stretched beneath us, polished enough to reflect the chandelier hanging overhead, each crystal shimmering like tiny captured stars. My footsteps echoed, hesitant but steady, while the staff lined up quietly along the hallway, watching us with polite smiles. She didn't walk in like a guest. She walked in like she belonged. Her heels clicked confidently, her eyes scanning the place with a mixture of nostalgia and unresolved grief. I could feel it. The memories pressing in, the one she had buried, the one she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She didn't speak. She just kept walking deeper inside, as if the house itself might answer the questions she never dared to ask. I followed behind her, feeling like an outsider in my own world. Strange, isn't it? You can live in luxury, sleep on silk sheets, breathe the air of privilege every single day, and still feel small next to someone who carries silent strength like armor. She paused near the long hallway that led to the east wing. Her breath caught, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "This used to be my father's favorite spot," she whispered. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with decades of weight pressing down on her. She lifted her hand and gently touched the carved wooden panel on the wall. A panel I had walked past thousands of times without noticing a thing, but she noticed. Her fingertips traced the design like she was touching the ghost of a past she never got to keep. I didn't interrupt. Some moments are too sacred for questions. The sunlight from the balcony spilled into the hallway, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Tiny pieces of time, still floating, still waiting. She turned toward me slowly, her eyes glistening but not broken. She wasn't the fragile girl her relatives had tried to bury. She wasn't the forgotten daughter they tried to erase. She was fire rediscovering its own heat. "Do you know why they never spoke about him?" she asked softly. I shook my head. I didn't trust myself to speak. Her lips curved into a painful, almost knowing smile. "Because they wanted his legacy, his power, his name. And they thought if they erased me, they could keep everything." The words hit me harder than a punch. This mansion, her mansion, wasn't just a home. It was a stolen crown, and she was finally standing in the throne room that was meant to be hers. She walked further down the hallway, past the portraits, past the memory, frozen in frames, until she reached the large double doors at the end. Her hand hovered over the handle, her breath unsteady. "On the other side of this door," she said, "is the truth they hid my entire life," and she pushed it open. The doors creaked open, slowly, resisting her touch, as if even they remembered the secrets they had been guarding for years. A faint scent drifted out, old paper, polished wood, and something warm, like the echo of a life that once thrived inside these walls. When the room finally revealed itself, she froze in the doorway. It was a study, not grand, not overwhelming, but deeply personal. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with worn novels, leather-bound journals, and folders stacked with careful precision. A large desk sat near the window, sunlight pooling across its surface like a spotlight on a forgotten stage. Every object in the room felt untouched, preserved exactly the way it had been left, as if the owner had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. She stepped inside, her movements slower now, almost reverent. Her fingers brushed the back of the dusty armchair. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Her silence screamed with memories she had never lived but somehow still felt. This was his sanctuary, she whispered, her father's sanctuary. She moved toward the desk, and for a second I thought she might collapse. Her shoulders trembled, her breath quivered. but she stayed standing, steadying herself with one hand on the polished wood. The sunlight caught her eyes, revealing tears she was trying so hard to blink away. She reached for a drawer. It didn't open. She pulled again, harder this time. Still locked. Her jaw tightened. A storm gathered behind her eyes. Anger, grief, betrayal, all blending into something fierce and uncontainable. She searched the desk with frantic hands until she found a small brass key hidden beneath a stack of old letters. Her father had hidden it in plain sight. She slid the key into the lock. It clicked open with a soft sound that felt louder than thunder. Inside were documents, legal papers, deeds, maps of the estate, all stamped with the same signature. His signature, but that wasn't what stole her breath. At the bottom of the drawer, wrapped carefully in cloth, was a small leather-bound journal. Its cover was cracked. The pages yellowed with age. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it out, holding it like something sacred. She opened to the first page. Her father's handwriting filled the paper, strong and deliberate. "For my daughter, the one they will try to erase, but never succeed." Her knees buckled, and I rushed forward, catching her before she fell. She didn't sob loudly. She didn't break dramatically. Tears simply slid down her face as she clutched the journal to her chest, shaking with the weight of being seen, finally, undeniably seen. The words inside weren't just ink. They were proof. Proof that she wasn't forgotten. Proof that she wasn't abandoned. Proof that her father had loved her enough to leave behind the truth even if he couldn't protect her from the ones who tried to steal her legacy. She turned the page with trembling hands. "Everything that is mine," the journal continued, "is hers." Her breath caught again. The room seemed to close in, not with fear, but with justice finally returning home. She looked at me with eyes full of fire and ache. "They lied to me my entire life," she said. "But he didn't." Her voice didn't break. It sharpened. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a discovery. It was the beginning of a war. She held the journal like it was a lifeline, her fingers gripping the worn leather so tightly her knuckles turned white. I could almost hear her heart beat. In the silence of the room, fast, uneven, fighting against everything she had been told since childhood. The truth wasn't gentle. It rarely is. It crashes into your life like a storm, tearing apart everything you thought you knew. She turned another page. Dates, entries, memories written in ink. Her father had documented everything. Meetings, warnings, whispered threats from relatives who pretended to be family. Lines and lines of worry about her safety. Fear of what they would do once he was gone, and notes about lawyers he had entrusted to secure her inheritance. Every word was a wound opening, every sentence, a confession of battles fought behind closed doors. "He tried to protect me," she murmured, her voice hollow and raw. "He fought for me, and I never knew." Her breath shook. She closed the journal gently, almost tenderly, and placed her palm on it as if trying to absorb the truth through her skin. She stared at the window for a long moment before speaking again, her tone calmer but heavier. "When he died," she whispered, "they didn't just take the property. They stole my identity, my name, everything I was supposed to become." She walked toward the bookshelf and pulled out another document. This one framed, dusty, hidden behind stacks of old papers. She handed it to me. It was her father's will, signed. Stamped, legally binding, and her name was right there. Not erased, not replaced, not hidden, front and center. The rightful heir. My throat tightened, my mind raced. This wasn't just a simple inheritance issue. This was a deliberate betrayal. A calculated attempt to bury a child, so deep in lies that she would never rise again. She sat in her father's chair, slowly. Like she was claiming a throne she didn't realize she had lost. The moment she touched the armrests, something shifted in her. Her posture straightened. Her gaze sharpened. She no longer looked fragile. She looked like someone who had just remembered who she was. "What will you do now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. "I'm done being silent." Her voice didn't tremble. It thundered. She stood up and placed the journal, the key, and the will onto the center of the desk like pieces of a puzzle finally aligned. "They stole my life," she said softly, "but I'm taking it back." Her footsteps echoed across the room as she walked toward the door. No hesitation, no fear, no looking back. But just as she reached the threshold, she paused. "They think I'm still the girl who left this mansion with nothing," she said. "They're about to meet the woman who returned with everything." And she stepped out, leaving behind the ghosts of the past, walking straight into the beginning of her reckoning. When she stepped out of the study, she wasn't the same person who had walked in trembling and unsure. Something in her eyes had awakened. Something fierce, Something rightful. Something that had been sleeping under years of silence and manipulation. I followed her down the long hallway. The sound of her heels striking the marble, like a declaration of war. The staff glanced at us nervously. They sensed the shift, the tension, humming in the air like electricity before a storm. Some of them lowered their eyes with guilt. Maybe they had known pieces of the truth. Maybe they had suspected. Maybe they had been too afraid to speak. She didn't blame them. She didn't even look at them. Her focus was elsewhere, laser-sharp and burning. She stopped near the grand staircase, her hand brushing the elegant railing etched with gold details. They held parties here, she said quietly, laughing, celebrating, while I was living miles away, believing I wasn't wanted, believing my father left me nothing. Her voice didn't break, it hardened. I could feel the rage simmering beneath her calm exterior. Not wild, chaotic rage, but controlled, precise. The kind of anger that builds empires when channeled right. The kind that destroys corruption when unleashed. She turned to me. I need the lawyer my father trusted. The one he mentioned in the journal. I nodded. I'll contact him. Tonight. But she shook her head. Now, before they get wind of this, before they scramble to cover what they've done. We walked toward the entrance hall. Sunlight pouring through the tall glass windows and casting long shadows at our feet. She paused at the massive double doors, her eyes drifting over the car crest, her family's emblem, the one she had been denied her entire life. She placed her hand over it. They thought hiding the truth would erase me, she whispered. But they didn't realize they were only sharpening me. Outside, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of summer, but a chill ran through me. Something was about to change, something big, something irreversible. Just as we reached the car, her phone buzzed in her hand. She froze. The screen lit up with a name neither of us expected, a relative, one of the ones who had pretended to care while quietly stealing everything behind her back. Her jaw clenched. They know I'm here. The phone kept vibrating, the name blinking over and over like a warning siren. She declined the call. The phone rang again. This time she answered. Her voice was calm, too calm. Yes. A man on the other end spoke rapidly, his tone frantic. Even from where I stood, I could hear the panic threading through every word. He asked where she was, why she was at the mansion, what she had found, whether someone had shown her something she shouldn't have seen. She didn't respond to any of his questions. When he paused to catch his breath, she simply said, "We need to talk, all of us, tomorrow." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Then he hissed, "What did you see?" She looked at the mansion behind her. The home that had been stolen, the legacy that had been buried. The truth she now held in her hands like a weapon forged from years of betrayal. "Enough," she replied softly, "to end your lies." She hung up before he could speak again. For the first time since stepping into the mansion, she allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Let them panic," she said. "It's their turn now." And as we drove away, I realized something crystal clear. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was reclaiming justice. And nothing could stop her now. The next morning arrived with the kind of heaviness that settles before something life-changing. She stood by the window of the guest room. The same room that once belonged to her as a child, staring outside at the long driveway where expensive cars would soon arrive carrying the people who had stolen her past. She didn't tremble. She didn't hesitate. She was ready. I watched her from a distance, noticing details I hadn't before, the way her shoulder no longer slumped, the strength in her jawline, the determination burning in her eyes. She had stepped out of her father's study the previous day as a daughter awakened. Today she was something more. She was an heir claiming her crown. A knock echoed from the hallway. The first car had arrived. She exhaled slowly. "Let's end this." When she walked into the main hall, the staff stood straighter than usual, as if instinctively sensing the shift in power. Some of them looked relieved, some anxious, but one thing was certain. They all knew the truth had found its way home. The large doors opened. Her uncle walked in first, the man who had spent years pretending to be the family's moral compass while quietly feeding lies into her life. His face tightened the moment he saw her standing at the center of the hall like the rightful owner she was. Behind him came her aunt, 2 cousins, and a family lawyer she did recognize, the one they had hired to bury her side of the story. No one dared sit. She didn't offer them seats anyway. "What is this drama?" Her uncle snapped, trying to sound authoritative. "You barge into the mansion, you ignore my calls, and now you summon us here like someone who owns this house." She interrupted, her tone calm, but sharp enough to cut the room in half. A flicker of fear flashed across his face. Just a flicker, quickly masked by arrogance. "This property is legally ours," he said, gesturing toward the lawyer beside him. "You have no right to." She walked forward and placed the journal, the will, and the key onto the marble table between them. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Her aunt's face drained of color. Her cousins exchanged nervous glances. The lawyer's eyes widened slightly, recognizing documents that should not have existed. At least, not according to the papers they had forged years ago. She didn't look at any of them. She looked only at her uncle. "My father did not leave this house to you," she said, "or the land, or the accounts, or the company. Every single thing was meant for me." He scoffed, but the confidence in his voice was thinning. "You think a journal proves anything?" "Anyone could have written. Open it," she said. He hesitated, but curiosity and fear pulled him forward. He flipped through the pages, his jaw clenched. His breathing grew shallow, his face reddened as he read entry after entry. Details only her father could have known, warning about him, about their manipulations, about the lies they would use against her. When he reached the will, his hand stopped shaking long enough for his mask to slip back into place. This impossible," he stammered. "If this were real, why didn't the lawyer—" "He did," she cut in softly. "The lawyer my father trusted. The one you scared away. I spoke to him this morning. He still had the backup documents, and he's ready to testify." Silence crashed over the whole. Her aunt finally spoke, voice trembling. You can't do this. You don't understand how." "You don't get to tell me what I understand," she said, stepping closer. "You took my childhood. You took my home. You took my identity. But what you couldn't take was the truth." Her uncle's voice cracked. "You won't win." She leaned in, her eyes cold and unwavering. "I already have." He opened his mouth to argue, but just then the doors opened again, and the trusted lawyer her father had appointed walked in with 2 officers and a folder filled with evidence. Her uncle staggered back, as if the walls themselves had betrayed him, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one afraid. The air in the hall shifted the moment the lawyer stepped inside. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the kind of silence that comes before lightning strikes. Her uncle's face twisted as though the ground beneath him had begun to crack. Her aunt clutched her handbag so tightly her fingers turned pale. The cousins, always so smug, always so quick with their mocking smiles, stood frozen. The lawyer approached her slowly, respectfully. "Just like your father," he said quietly. "You have his eyes and his strength." Her breath hitched for a fraction of a second, but she didn't let it break her composure. She nodded, then turned her attention back to the people who had built their lives on her stolen foundation. The lawyer placed a thick folder on the table, thicker than any of the documents they had brought. He opened it carefully, revealing stamped papers, verified signatures, copies of original deeds, court acknowledgments, security logs, bank transfers, and a sealed letter written in her father's signature handwriting. Her uncle's knees visibly wobbled. "This is a misunderstanding," he said desperately, his voice cracking. "She's manipulating." "She hasn't said a word," the lawyer snapped. "Everything you're seeing came from your own brother. Documents he filed, letters he wrote, records you tried very hard to erase." One of the officers stepped forward. "We have reason to believe fraud, property manipulation, and financial coercion were involved. We'll need statements from everyone." Her aunt staggered back like she had been struck. "You can't do this. We are family." "Family." The word echoed through the hall, bitter and empty. She stepped closer, her expression calm, too calm. "When I needed family," she said softly, "you disappeared." Her uncle's anger flared. "You don't understand what we sacrificed. We kept the business alive." You stole my father's company," she replied. "You stole the estate. You stole the accounts meant for my education. You stole everything you could, except his love." Her uncle fell silent. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. Her control was far more terrifying than rage. The lawyer handed her the sealed letter. "Your father asked me to give you this only when the truth reached you." Her fingers trembled as she broke the wax seal. Inside was a handwritten message, short, but powerful enough to shatter the last pieces of the life she thought she knew. "My daughter, if you are reading this, they failed to erase you. Take back what is yours, and don't fear them, they fear you." A tear slid down her cheek, a single tear, but she wiped it away before anyone could see. Her uncle rushed forward suddenly, panic overtaking arrogance. "Listen," he pleaded. "We can make a deal." She stepped back. "You broke me once," she whispered. "You don't get a second chance." The officers moved in closer, Sensing the confrontation reaching its peak, her cousins began arguing, blaming each other, their voices loud and desperate. Her aunt tried to cling to dignity, but her mask had already fallen to pieces. Her uncle looked around helplessly, the empire he built on theft collapsing right in front of him. And she just stood there, calm, steady, unshakable. The lawyer turned to her. "Would you like to press full charges?" She looked at her family, the ones who had let her grow up believing she was unwanted, unworthy, forgotten. Then she lifted her chin, her voice filled with quiet thunder. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice, and justice doesn't ask permission." Her uncle stared at her with wide, terrified eyes. What happens now?" he whispered. She took a step closer. Close enough that he had no choice but to hear the truth. "Now," she said, "you watch everything you stole come back to me." The hall fell into a suffocating silence, and in that silence, she finally became what she had always been destined to be, the rightful heir, the daughter they could not erase, the storm her father knew she would become. The hall emptied slowly, but the chaos lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. The officers escorted her uncle and cousins to separate rooms for questioning. Her aunt tried to maintain her dignity, fixing her shawl, wiping the sweat from her forehead, but her eyes kept darting toward the documents on the table as if they were burning her. She didn't watch them being taken away. She didn't need to. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the powerless one standing in the shadows. She stood in the doorway of the hall, breathing in the scent of polished wood, old chandeliers, and justice finally unfolding. The mansion didn't feel foreign anymore. The walls didn't feel cold. The echoes didn't feel empty. It felt like a place waiting for its rightful owner to return home. The lawyer approached quietly. "You handled that with grace," he said. "Your father would be proud." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I don't want them destroyed," she murmured. "You didn't destroy them," he replied gently. "They destroyed themselves." She stayed silent. His words were true, but truth didn't erase pain. Truth didn't erase the years stolen from her. Truth didn't erase the nights she cried, believing she wasn't enough for her own family to fight for her. She walked toward the balcony overlooking the massive courtyard. The garden below was overgrown, untended, a haunting symbol of what her life had become without her father. She rested her hands on the railing, breathing deeply. "Does winning always feel this heavy?" she asked softly. I stepped beside her. "Only when you fought alone for too long." She closed her eyes, letting the breeze brush against her face. She didn't cry. Not anymore. The tears that once fell from wounds were now replaced by strength built from scars. Footsteps echoed behind us. The trusted lawyer cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said. She turned, surprised. He handed her a smaller envelope, thinner than the last, sealed in the same wax, but with a date written on the front. A date from years ago, the year her father died. This was his final message, the lawyer said. "He asked me to give it to you only when the inheritance was restored." Her breath caught. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter in her father's handwriting and a photograph, a picture of him holding her as a baby, smiling at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Her heart cracked, but it didn't break. It opened. She read the letter silently. "My daughter, if they ever took this home from you, remember, a house can be stolen, but your bloodline cannot. You are the future of this family. You are the reason I built this empire. And you are stronger than anything they tried to bury you under." Her vision blurred for a moment. She pressed the letter against her chest, as if trying to feel his heartbeat through the paper. Then she whispered, "I missed you, Dad." The lawyer stepped back respectfully, giving her space. The mansion seemed to breathe with her, as if the walls themselves recognized her voice. The light through the windows softened, warming the cold marble. Somewhere deep inside the house, a clock that hadn't chimed in years suddenly struck the hour, echoing through the halls. It felt like her father was welcoming her home. She turned to me, her eyes shining not with sorrow but with newfound purpose. "It's time to rebuild," she said quietly. "Not just the house, but my life." "What about them?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "They'll face the consequences. But I won't let hatred shape my future. I've lived in their shadows long enough." Her strength wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was steady. The kind that doesn't break, even under the heaviest weight. She walked back through the hall, past the portraits, past the memories, past the ghosts of everything she lost. But this time, she didn't walk like a stranger. She walked like the woman her father always believed she would become. Tomorrow the legal battle would begin. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth. Tomorrow, the legacy would be restored. But today, Today was the first day she stood in her power, and nothing could take that away again. The room fell into a silence so thick it felt like the walls were listening. His mother's eyes flicked between her son and me, searching for some version of the past she could still control. His father straightened his back, almost offended by the shift in power he hadn't seen coming. The air tasted like old memories mixed with new shock. He slipped his hand into mine, not for show, not to impress them, but with a quiet certainty that told the truth. He wasn't letting me stand alone ever again. His thumb brushed against my knuckles as if reminding me that the girl who once sat outside their house, waiting for permission to matter, was gone. I didn't bring her here for your approval, he said softly, but his voice carried through the room like a strike of thunder. I brought her because she's part of my life. You don't have to accept it, but you can't erase it. For a moment, no one moved. His mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't used to this version of him, this man who didn't shrink at her tone, who didn't bend to keep the peace. I watched her face shift, trying to calculate if she had just lost her son or if she needed to adjust her strategy. His father cleared his throat, leaning forward. You built all this? He asked, more stunned than angry now. This entire place, this life? Yes, he replied. And it didn't come from luck. It came from choosing my own path. And then, unexpectedly, his father's gaze landed on me. And she helped you get here. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and caution, like he was reevaluating everything he believed about who should stand beside his son. But before my husband could answer, I stepped forward. I didn't build his success, I said. I just reminded him he didn't have to live under a shadow forever. His father didn't reply, but something in his expression cracked, maybe not acceptance, but a realization that he had misjudged the girl who once had nothing. His mother still held her teacup like it was a fragile shield, but she was watching me too. And this time the look wasn't contempt, it was discomfort, because people like her never expected the ones they cast out to return standing taller. The silence shifted again when the house manager entered the room, bowed respectfully to me first, and asked if he should prepare the dining hall. The shock in their faces was almost painful, because in their world respect was ranked, ordered, written in invisible rules. And now the girl they once looked down on was someone the entire mansion recognized as lady of the house. My husband didn't miss the moment. That's right, he said calmly. This home belongs to both of us. His mother finally set her cup down, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. A tiny sound, but it felt like a surrender, not acceptance, but the first fracture in her old beliefs. She studied the room, then looked at me again as if trying to understand how everything she thought she controlled had slipped through her fingers. And as I stood there, with my husband's hand in mine, I realized something. I didn't need their approval anymore, because sometimes life doesn't give you the family you deserve. Sometimes it makes you build your own future so big, so undeniable, that the past can't shrink you ever again. The dining hall felt too grand for the four of us, its crystal lights scattering across the long table like fragments of old truths waiting to cut someone. The staff served the meal quietly, their movements smooth and practiced, but the tension sitting between us was sharp enough to taste. His mother barely touched her plate. His father kept glancing at my husband, as if trying to decode this new man he couldn't control anymore. And my husband, he was calm. Too calm. Like he already knew something that none of us did. Halfway through dinner, his father finally spoke. So what do you plan now? He asked. Voice slow, cautious. Now that you've built all this. My husband set down his fork. I'm planning something important, he said. Something I should have done a long time ago. His mother stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small black envelope, and placed it gently in the center of the table. The paper looked ordinary, harmless, but it felt terrifying. Like it was carrying the weight of something explosive. His parents exchanged a confused glance. What is this? His mother whispered. You'll see, he said. Open it. For a second, no one moved. The chandelier hummed above us. My heartbeat was so loud I almost heard it echo. His father finally reached out and opened the envelope. He froze. His mother leaned in, and the color drained from her face so fast, it looked like a shock had punched the breath out of her. Their hands trembled. My husband watched them quietly. What is this? His mother choked out. You already know, he replied. No, this can't be real, his father said, his voice cracking for the first time. Where did you get this? My husband leaned back in his chair, eyes cold, steady, unblinking. I've known the truth for months, he said. And I'm done covering for both of you. My chest tightened. I didn't even know what was inside the envelope. But whatever it was, it shattered them. His mother's eyes, filled with tears, actual tears, like a secret she had buried years ago, had suddenly been pulled out into the light. His father whispered, "Please, listen. We can explain." My husband stood up slowly. "No," he said. "You'll explain tomorrow in front of everyone." His mother grabbed his arm in panic. "You can't do this. It will destroy everything." He looked down at her hand, then at her face. "That's the point." The room went silent. A cold breeze slipped in from the open balcony door. I felt a shiver run through me. His father clutched the envelope to his chest, as if it contained his last breath. His mother's lips were shaking, forming words she couldn't say. "What was inside it?" I whispered. My husband turned to me, and for the first time that evening there was fear in his eyes. But he didn't answer. He just said one thing: "Pack your things tonight. We're leaving before sunrise." And then the lights flickered, once, twice, as if the entire mansion knew something was coming. Something big, something dangerous. The mansion felt too quiet after dinner, as if every wall was holding its breath. His parents hadn't come out of the dining hall. Maybe they were still staring at that black envelope, shaken to the core. My husband didn't say a single word the entire walk back to our room. His silence was heavy, almost frightening. When he finally closed the bedroom door, he leaned against it with his eyes shut, as if trying to gather strength. I had never seen him like that, never seen fear sit behind his confidence. "What was inside the envelope?" I whispered. He opened his eyes slowly. Something they thought I'd never find. Something they hid from me for years. I stepped closer. "Please, tell me." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "They lied about my past, lied about something that destroyed my childhood. But now I have proof." My stomach dropped. "Proof of what?" He looked at me, and the weight in his eyes was unbearable. "That my real mother didn't abandon me," he said. "She didn't run away. She didn't disappear." I froze. "She was pushed out," he whispered. "Forced, lied about, replaced." My breath caught in my throat. "By them?" He nodded once, slowly, painfully. "They told me she left because she didn't want a child. But the envelope, the documents, the signatures, it proves they took me from her. They used money, power, connection. And all these years I hated a woman who never even had a choice. I felt my knees weaken. Where is she now?" His voice cracked for the first time. Alive. Tears slipped down his face silently, like he had been holding them back for years. "She's been searching for me," he said, "for 28 years. I didn't move. Couldn't breathe. And tomorrow," he whispered, "I'm bringing everything into the light, in front of them. In front of the people they fear the most. They're going to answer for what they did." The room went silent. Then suddenly a loud bang echoed from downstairs. Both of us jerked in shock. Footsteps, rushed, panicked, then a scream. Not loud, but sharp. Real, terrified. He grabbed my hand instantly, stood behind me. We ran into the hallway, the mansion dim except for the cold lights along the floor. At the bottom of the staircase, his father stood frozen, staring at the front door, which was wide open, swinging in the wind. His mother was on the floor, trembling, clutching the empty black envelope. "It's gone," she whispered. "The papers, someone took them." My husband's face drained of color. "Who?" he shouted. But she didn't answer. She just lifted a shaking hand and pointed toward the door, and with a voice full of terror she said only 4 words. She came for them. My heart stopped. His father backed away, whispering, "This can't be happening. She wasn't supposed to find us." Before he could finish, the lights in the entire mansion shut off. Everything turned black, and in the darkness, a woman's silhouette appeared in the doorway, standing perfectly still, watching us, breathing softly, like she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. The darkness felt alive, heavy, breathing with us. My husband tightened his grip on my hand, but I could feel the tremor in his fingers, a fear he had never shown before. The woman in the doorway didn't move. She just stood there, a silhouette against the faint moonlight. But even in the dimness, there was something familiar about her posture, something that made my husband's breath hitch. "Who are you?" his father shouted, trying to sound brave, but the shake in his voice betrayed him. The silhouette stepped forward, slowly, silently. His mother clung to his arm, trembling. "Please, don't come any closer." But the woman kept walking, each step making the truth feel heavier and the air colder. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "You took everything from me." My husband's entire body froze. That voice. He had heard it once before, in the recordings he found, in the documents hidden. Inside the envelope, a mother's voice that had been stolen from his memory. He whispered, "Mom." His father flinched as if stabbed. His mother's nails dug into his arm. The silhouette stepped fully into the weak light, and there she was. Older, tired, but with eyes full of a kind of love that survives even when everything else dies. Eyes that mirrored his real mother. Tears spilled down my husband's cheeks before he could stop them. She reached out a trembling hand, not touching him, just offering the gesture she'd waited decades to give. He took one step forward, then another, until he stood only inches from her. "Why didn't you fight them?" he whispered, voice cracking. She shook her head. "I did. But they were powerful. I was young, alone, and they told me you'd be safer without me." His father stepped forward desperately. "Enough. Stop this." She turned sharply, her voice suddenly sharp and full of years of buried fury. "You stole my child." His father's face twisted. "We gave him a better life." "You gave him a lie," she whispered, "and you built an empire on it." The room shook with the weight of the truth. My husband's mother fell to her knees, sobbing not from guilt, but from fear of losing everything. My husband turned to them, his expression hollow. "All these years, you let me hate her." His father tried to speak, but words failed him. His real mother touched his face with trembling fingers. "I never stopped looking for you." My husband grabbed her hand and held it against his cheek, shutting his eyes in a pain so deep it almost broke the air around us. Then, a sudden crash. Glass shattering somewhere behind us. The front door slammed. We all spun around, but no one was there. His father rushed toward the noise, panic rising. No, he can't be here." "Who?" my husband demanded. His father's voice cracked. "You weren't the only thing we hid." Before he could finish, a shadow moved across the hallway fast, silent, inhuman in its calm. My husband pushed me behind him again. The shadow stepped forward, and the dim light finally revealed the face. A young man. My husband's age, same jawline, same eyes, same blood, same mother. He stared at my husband with a mixture of resentment and heartbreak. "You found her," he said quietly, "just like I did." Everyone froze. Even his real mother gasped. My husband's voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The young man smiled painfully. "The son they didn't manage to steal." His mother covered her mouth. No, it can't be." The young man turned toward the couple who ruined everything. "You stole one child," he said slowly, "but not both." The room spun. 2 pasts, 2 sons, 2 lives torn apart. My husband stared at him, unable to breathe. His brother living all these years in the shadows of their parents' secrets. And then the final twist hit like lightning. The brother looked at me, then at my husband, and whispered, "You think this is the end?" "No, this is just the beginning." Everything went silent. Lights flickered, and the screen of the security panel lit up on its own. Intruder alert. Lockdown activated. The door sealed. The window shut. Someone had triggered the system. But none of us had touched it. The mansion locked itself with us all inside. And in that moment, we finally understood the truth wasn't the most dangerous thing in this house. The people were.